Let's talk about running backs that you should start or sit in week 12 of the fantasy football season. We have got a lot of teams on bye. The Falcons, Bills, Bengals, Jags, Saints, and Jets all on bye. So you will have no Bijan Robinson, James Cook, Chase Brown, Travis Etienne, Alvin Kamara, or Breece Hall. But don't worry, in today's video, I'm going to go through all 26 teams playing this week, 13 matchups in total, and we're going to help you set your lineups. Starting with Thursday Night Football, an AFC North divisional game, Steelers at Browns. 39.5 point over-under, which is actually the lowest over-under of the week. So we've had some pretty good Thursday Night Football games this year. Certainly not last week. We won't talk about that. But this might be one of the lower scoring games of the week. The Steelers are favored by 4.5 points. This is very simple. Najee Harris is a must start for me. The guy is just thriving on volume. It's a defense that ultimately is allowing other offenses kind of driving down the field consistently. So with Najee and the pure amount of volume that he gets on a week-to-week basis, I do think he's a playable name, especially with the amount of players on bye this week. As far as Jaylen Warren goes, he's had a really healthy amount of opportunities in the last couple weeks. He had 16 touches in week 10, and just last week he had 13 touches. He's someone that in PPR formats gives you a really solid floor. On the opposite side of the ball, it has been really confusing with Nick Chubb. All right, we saw this, elevation in his snap percentage and carries in the last couple weeks. And then after the bye week, which every indication would tell us that, okay, the bye week just happened, Nick Chubb's going to get more involved. Nope. They gave him just 11 carries. He was efficient for the first time, but they just didn't give him any touches. They gave it to Jerome Ford. So I'm still going to label Nick Chubb a spot start just purely because of the amount of buys this week, but I don't feel comfortable playing him if you have a better option. This brings us to the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. The Chiefs at the Panthers, 41.5 point over under, and the Chiefs are favored by almost 11 points. The Chiefs are huge favorites. Panthers are massive underdogs. Obviously, for obvious reasons, this could be a massacre this game. The Chiefs, it is going to be a little bit confusing in this matchup, okay? Kareem Hunt, look, if it's just Kareem Hunt, that's easy, but the reality is, according to Rap Sheet, Isaiah Pacheco is expected to be healthy for week 12, and it'll be a coach's decision on whether he plays against the Panthers or not. So that is something that we will have to monitor throughout the week. And honestly, if both are playing, they both become spot starts. It's a great matchup, so they both could have an opportunity to score major points. But the reality is we don't know what the split will be like. We don't know how much Pacheco will be given in his first week back. We really don't have much evidence on what to kind of rely on right now for a running back with this type of injury coming back in the same season. So look, if Pacheco is ruled out again this week, then Kareem Hunt becomes my RB16, a must start this week. The matchup is too juicy against the Panthers, who are the best matchup for your running back. But if both play, they remain spot starts. On the opposite side of the ball, Chuba Hubbard, a locked and loaded play, my RB17 this week. It is a tough matchup, but with the amount of players on bye, you can't be too picky about matchups this week. And yes, Jonathan Brooks, according to Dave Canales, he fully expects Jonathan Brooks to play this week, but will still need to go through a week of work, and he does not expect Miles Sanders to play. So ultimately, even if Jonathan Brooks plays, he won't have enough volume to really hurt Chuba Hubbard's opportunities, and we know this entire offense is built around Chuba Hubbard, especially after that contract extension. All right, moving on to an NFC North battle. We've got Vikings, Bears, 40.5 point over-under, which is tied for the second lowest over-under of the week. The Vikings are favored by 3.5 points. Aaron Jones, my RB14 going into the week, has been dealing with injuries here and there, but as long as he's healthy, he's got to be in your lineups. The Bears are a top 10 matchup when you adjust for schedule. I know Cam Akers has been getting more and more work, but I still think Aaron Jones is the one to play. And on the opposite side of the ball, DeAndre Swift, my RB18. This is a very tough matchup. This is one of the first real tests for DeAndre Swift. In fact, if you have him, I would not be afraid to sell high because he has Minnesota this week, then Detroit, San Francisco, Minnesota again, Detroit again. It's a lot of really tough matchups upcoming for DeAndre Swift. So if you have a buy or a sell high opportunity in your league, I wouldn't be opposed to doing it. But in this matchup, you can play him based off of volume. All right, moving on to the Titans at the Texans. 41.5 point over under. The Texans are favored by 8.5 points, which is the third largest spread of the week. Tony Pollard, we're going to label him a must start, but I will say it's getting closer and closer to the edge of a spot start because Tajay Spears is starting to really eat into that workload. Now, last week, Tajay Spears had 6 touches. The week before that, Tajay Spears had 10 touches, and the snap share in the last 2 weeks has been about 58% to 45% in favor of Tony Pollard. However, The good news for Tony Pollard owners is Tajay Spears did suffer a concussion, so it's very unlikely he plays this week, which means Tony Pollard, based off of volume alone, because it's not a good matchup, is a playable name. On the opposite side of the ball, of course, you're going to start Joe Mixon, one of the best running backs in fantasy right now. There's no point of us really discussing that. All right, moving on to the Lions at the Colts. 50.5 point over-under, the highest over-under of the week. We should see a ton of fantasy points in this one. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, both must starts every single week, regardless of what matchup they incur. David Montgomery is the RB10 right now through 11 weeks, and Jahmyr Gibbs is the RB6. Both must starts each and every week. On the opposite side of the ball, Jonathan Taylor, it has been a little bit disappointing, but the volume is still there. He had 26 touches last week, 25 touches the week before. This is a guy who is definitely dominating opportunities, carries, targets. He had a goal line touch last week. He just didn't convert on it. Could that be this week where he does? It's a tough defense, but regardless, we know how talented he is and we know the volume he will see. All right, moving on. We've got Patriots at Dolphins, an AFC East matchup. 45.5 point over under. The Dolphins are favored by a full touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson, is starting to get a safer and safer floor because of the pure volume that he's seeing. You'd like to see him get a little bit more work through the air, but regardless, he's had 20 carries in 3 out of the last 4 games. With Drake May as well, this offense is firing a little bit better. They're extending drives a little bit more, which gives Stevenson more opportunity to score fantasy points. And the Dolphins are a top 10 matchup for your fantasy running back. On the opposite side of the ball, of course, you're going to start Devon Achane. He's one of the best running backs in fantasy. With Tua playing the quarterback position, he is on track for like a 17-game pace of 110 targets. It's insane. That's why Jalen Waddle has been so bad this year, because they are targeting Devon Achane like he's a wide receiver. It's actually kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. I mean, if you take away Devon Achane's rushing work this year and you only look at his receiving yardage, he is still going to be out producing Jalen Waddle in fantasy football. Now, here's the interesting part for the Dolphins. Raheem Mostert has essentially become a third down back. He doesn't really get many carries. He's only used on third down, maybe mostly for pass protection. But Jalen Wright has slowly taken over that spell back who's going to get that work on the ground. So I don't think you can play either of those names anymore. It's just Devon Achane, and that is it. Moving on, we've got Bucs at Giants. Okay, 42.5 point over under. The Bucs are favored in this one. I love both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving in this matchup. They're both going to be top 24 plays for me this week. They both are such important parts of this offense. They split work, they get carries, they get targets, they get opportunities on the goal line. I love both of these names, especially without Chris Godwin. They are really trying to replace him through their running backs by targeting them. And the Giants are a top 10 matchup for the running back position. On the opposite side of the ball, Tyrone Tracy has been dominating touches recently. It's clearly his backfield in New York. So based off of that alone, I am comfortable playing him against the Buccaneers. He's my RB13 this week. Such a talented player, can be so efficient on the ground and dynamic in the air. Last time out versus Carolina, he had 20 touches. The week before that, he had 17, 23 before the week before that. Point being is he's that dude. Devin Singletary is the clear spellback, and it is Tyrone's world, and we're all living in it, all right? All right, moving on to the NFC East. We've got Cowboys at Commanders. The first time the Commanders are favored by over 4 points, I think, in like 2 decades. It's absolutely crazy, but I love to see it. This is the second largest spread of the week, meaning the Commanders are big favorites to bounce back this week, and I think they should. Brian Robinson, an absolute must start for me this week. Is getting healthier and healthier each and every week. Last week, he had 17 touches. He got a touchdown against a very difficult Philadelphia Eagles defense. Now he gets to face the Cowboys, who are a top 6 matchup for your running back. Definitely think he's in play. And Eckler is a fine, spot start. He gets enough work in the air to be considered. On the opposite side of the ball, look, Rico Dowdle has been on my bust list for 2 weeks in a row, and he's had 2 weeks in a row under 10 fantasy points in PPR leagues. The reality is this offense just is not very good. And the only name you can rely on is CeeDee Lamb. So if he is your best option, I get it. You can put him in there. But I think most people, 90% of people, are going to have a better name to play than Rico Dowdle. All right, let's go to the start of the 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. We've got an AFC West showdown with the Broncos at Raiders. 40.5 point over-under, tied for the second lowest over-under of the week. Do not count on much fantasy points from the running backs in this game. Not a lot of expected points, and there's a bunch of confusing situations here. Let's start with the Broncos. Okay, so Javonte Williams 2 weeks ago has 30% of the snaps, 3 touches. And then Audric Estime dominates opportunities in snap share. Then the following week, last week, it completely flips again. Javonte goes to be the lead back. He has 14 total touches, while Estime is just used barely. He has 6 rushes on the ground. He plays 23% of the snaps. There is literally no rhyme or reason to what Sean Payton does. I think he's purely, with usage for the running backs going based off of vibes. I really think that. So I have no idea who to tell you to play. Like I said, in week 10, Estime had 14 touches to 3 for Javonte. In week 11, it swapped back from 9 to 14 for Javonte. And the snap share is now in favor in Javonte over the last 2 weeks. It is so confusing. It's a great matchup, but I have no idea who to tell you to play. Sure, maybe it's Javonte. Maybe Javonte has a week this week. We've seen it plenty of times where Javonte does good and then they don't use him the next week. How are you supposed to know? Rant over. On the opposite side, it doesn't get any more clear, okay? Because Alexander Mattison was the dominant running back for the majority of the season, and now they want to get Zamir White in there. Now they want to get, not Brandon Bolden, who is the other guy they're trying to get in there. It's Amir Abdullah, but a bunch of these guys are injured as well, so we have no idea what's going to happen. Alexander Mattison dealt with an injury, so I have no idea what to tell you right now. The only way you want to start any of these guys is if the majority of them are hurt and not playing. So that means that, okay, if Madison is out and Amir Abdullah is the starting running back and there's no one to compete with him, sure, you can play him. But the reality is, I think this is just too messy to play around with. All right, let's talk 49ers at Packers. 47.5 over under. And the next 3 matchups we're covering are heavy hitters for offensive matchups. All right, Packers are favored by 1.5 points. It's a close spread. McCaffrey, of course, you're going to start Christian McCaffrey. He is starting to really dominate touches. In the last 2 weeks, Christian McCaffrey is averaging 16 carries, 6 targets, and over 91% of the snaps. You got to keep playing him no matter what. And on the opposite side, you got another name that is a must start, Josh Jacobs, who has scored 20 or more PPR points in 3 out of his last 4 games, 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games as well, 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games. So both these guys are must starts. Now, I will say, Marshawn Lloyd is coming off the injury reserve. I would suggest to stash him in deeper formats just to see what sort of role he can have. I know we've had great minds in the industry compare him to DeAndre Swift, so I do think he is worth rostering. All right, Cardinals at Seahawks, 47.5 over under, and the Seahawks are favored by 1.5 points. James Conner, a must start. He's been so freaking good, and he's staying healthy, which is ultimately kind of surprising, but we're not going to try and jinx it whatsoever. But we're going to play James Conner. On the opposite side, you're going to play Ken Walker. Again, another guy who's been one of the better picks. Honestly, if you could say in the middle rounds who were the best picks in fantasy football, it's probably Ken Walker and James Conner. And these are 2 matchups that are top 15 for the position. A high over under. Of course, you're going to start both of these names. Don't overthink it. All right, let's talk about Sunday Night Football. We've got Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams, a high over under 47.5 points, a close spread, 3 points in favor of the Eagles. Absolutely, we're going to start both of these names with the utmost confidence. Kyren Williams, despite a really, terrible stretch in the last 3 games, is still the running back 8 on the season. And if we look at Saquon Barkley, he has been absolutely dominating, the RB2 on the year, the 8th overall player in scoring. You're going to start both of these guys with the utmost confidence, even though they have bust weeks every once in a while. Every player does that. And moving on, last matchup, Monday Night Football, Ravens-Chargers. Second highest over-under of the week. The Ravens are favored by 2.5 points. Of course, you're going to start Derrick Henry. The question is, how do we feel about J.K. Dobbins? Well, J.K. Dobbins is my RB20, a must start this week, coming off a week where he got into the end zone twice, 2 touchdowns, almost 19 points versus the Bengals. Now, it's a more difficult matchup versus the Ravens than the Cincinnati Bengals, but still, based off volume alone, I think he's got to be in your lineups. And let's hope that Gus Edwards, stops taking away some of his chances. But that is it for today. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content. And if you got a question that you want to ask us, a tough start sit, check out the pinned comment. We'll be answering questions all week on the website. And if you don't have a free account on the Flock Fantasy website just yet, go sign up. Use a promo code LAN. All right. If you use our promo code LAN, you'll get the expert consensus rankings, the My Team, and the trade calculator all for free. as a thank you for using our promo code. I appreciate you for watching the video. Let's go get some wins in week number 12. And the wide receiver video will be out today in a couple of hours. So be staying tuned to the channel. Although, now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.